Hey everyone, Tactics here, and with season 1 of The War Within well underway, players are starting to hit some pretty hard walls when it comes to dungeon and bosses. So in this video, I'm going to be going over 5 bosses that I've had the most questions about on my stream, discussing some strategy for you and walking you through one of my kill videos for each of the bosses here from live realms, not from beta testing, to hopefully help make them easier for you. If I don't cover a boss that you are interested in, please do let me know down in the comments below, and if you have enough, maybe we'll do a part 2 for this video. As a note, most of the keys are going to be done on +9s here, because that's just what we've been farming on live servers. However, they are still tyrannical 9s, so there is still a good idea here in terms of damage intake of what is relevant to you guys, hopefully. If you're looking for +10 stuff, I'm going to be putting out walkthroughs. One is already out on my channel, and the next will be out over the next week or so, so make sure you're subscribed for those. Otherwise, let's get into the boss here that we are staring at, Erudax from Grim Batol. So the big thing people are struggling with here is a combination of dealing with the tentacles and dealing with this void surge damage, particularly with the ads, what I've seen. So this is moderate shadow damage on its own, right? You have quite a bit of time to react to that at this key level anyways, with our current gear level, which I think was somewhere between 605 and I think around 610, let's say, in this video. So usually a healer is able to establish that. So healers, make sure you are prepared for those little shadow gales every time they happen. If you are a DPSer that has a lot of defensives, for example, a warrior that can spell reflect quite frequently, not a bad spot to put your short, small defensive, but otherwise you don't want to commit big defensives to that, at least in my opinion. Now, in terms of the beginning of this fight, here goes the Shadow Gale spawn. This is probably confusing a lot of people. So basically what happens is this creates a circle that is centered on some part of the room, and you can use the edges of the room here to kind of help you a little bit see where it's going to be. The more of this edge you see, the further from this spot it's going to be, basically. So just going to do a quick look around. You can see that side's very close to me, so I know it's going to be somewhere in this area. So I see how close that was. I start moving away, do a little ping once we figure out where it is. And then as it starts closing in more and more, we'll see where the actual defined spot is. But just doing a quick look at the edges of the room and see which is close to you and which is far from you, that helps you indicate which direction you need to move in. Once you're here, you're going to get that Abyssal Corruption dot, so you want to try and pre-spread as best you can, just so you don't cleave each other too much. This is pretty heavy damage there, so you see immediately take a couple ticks. It was pretty hard. This is where defensives I recommend being put. This deals quite a bit of damage if you get this dot, so make sure you are careful with your health. Like I said, defensives. And then this is where the ads come out. And the biggest thing I can recommend is don't AoE immediately. Be careful with your AoE. These guys do tend to home in on healers because, of course, healers are pressing healing buttons and getting healing aggro. So tanks try and pick these up as best you can. But beware of this crush, of course. Do not get hit into a tentacle. If you are a tank that has a gap closer, like a charge, like Death Advance, or something like that, if you don't have that, I think it's like, what, Paladin doesn't have that. It might just be Paladin because monks have Transcend. So Paladins, you might want to find like a wall or something to put your back to. But you can see here, I get knocked with the crush. Of course, with the defensive up, charge right back. And I could have charged back earlier. Just watch where you're getting knocked. Don't get knocked into a tentacle. That's bad news. And you can see the big thing here is we are not cleaving these hatchlings yet. There's light AoE going on to them, right? And obviously, like, my rotation is going to do some passive AoE. The warrior, the mage, they're going to do some passive AoE, but these aren't being focused. We wait till this start, and at this point, that's when you can start cleaving them. Once this void surge has started, we actually are a little slow on cleaving these guys down, because these guys will apply that shadow damage amp to you, and if this is empowered by a shadow damage amp, you are in a lot of danger. So saving the killing of these hatchlings until after that happens is definitely very, very good in terms of mitigating a ton of damage. Now, we kill this a bit slow, almost too slow, by the way, because you want to kill them just shortly after the cast finishes, because we have this vulnerability, and of course those dots come out, and those dots are also shadow damage. So you want to make sure, it's kind of a fine line here of making sure you don't amp up the AoE, but you also don't amp up the dots. Again, if you had to pick one, you probably would amp up the dots, because that's what I recommend people defensiving. But if you do kill it a little early, just make sure you put defensives on the AoE instead. Again, and there it just kind of repeats, right? So we're finding the safe area. Again, do a little quick look around. When the Shadow Gale goes out, I'm going to do a quick look around the room. Where's close? Where's far? We can see that's far again. Don't even see it at all. Meanwhile, you can see the spot right here, so that's why we start moving in this direction. Just a quick adjustment like that, and it's almost the exact spot where we were, actually, which is very, very Very little lucky there, a little lucky there. And again, pre-spread and just kind of repeats from there. The big thing is managing that shadow vulnerability. Like I said, the shadow vulnerability is very important. Do not go full Unga Bunga and just cleave everything. Pause a little bit and start cleaving once that cast has at least started. That is this boss. Let's move on to Stitchflesh, because this is the boss that caught some people by surprise. Now, on beta, I think I was saying, like, this is probably one of the harder bosses in this place now after the beta tuning, but in Shadowlands, that was not the case, right? In Shadowlands, it was the last boss that everyone was, like, saving weapons for and doing that. In this expansion, it seems like this third boss is going to be that wall, and so what I definitely recommend you doing is picking up those spears, picking up those anima orbs, and saving them for this boss. These are spread out throughout the dungeon. I have them marked in my MDT route. That is from my pug-friendly video. There's 3 orbs you can get. There's 3 spears you can get. And basically the spears put a stacking damage amp on target's hit. And the orbs just pulse for AoE damage. So you can throw 3 spears at the boss when you hook them down. And then you can use the 3 anima orbs on top of the 3 spears damage amp on top of your CDs. And Lust, if you have it. We do have it in this case, but you may not always have it. And just nuke the boss. And the creation kind of gets collateraled by that. Now, to start off here, one thing is the puddles spawned from the boss are player targeted. So don't try and fill this path full of gunk here, because you do want to be pointing the cleaver or the line attack, sorry, at the boss here. So try not to go too early and fill it up with goo like this. It's not ideal. That one's not on the line actually, so it's fine. But that is something you want to try and avoid as best you can, at least early on this fight. And now boom, the boss is down, and all of a sudden we're all throwing our spears. I'm throwing the spear. 3 spears are through now. I don't even show the debuff, unfortunately. And now we're just all focusing Stitchflesh with Lust and CDs. You see the creation is not even the focus of this, but it's getting kind of collateraled here by all the extra damage, which is nice because you can see the stacking buff here. This is pulsing party damage, and this is what's getting a lot of people. This is where that heavy group damage is coming from, if you're not aware. It's from these creations. And so in Shadowlands, the strategy was to kind of keep this guy alive, but with this triple weapon strategy and popping seeds and all that stuff, I don't think it's a big deal if this guy ends up dying by the time Surgeon Stitchflesh jumps back up if you don't end up one-phasing it. I think that's actually fine, because you should get the boss relatively low enough that you'll be able to kill him quite early into the next phase. So waiting around a little bit for an ad to spawn is not the end of the world, especially when this ad is already dead. So again, we're big damage here. We're move the boss. I move the boss here to try and interrupt the morbid fixate. You can see I see the hook come out. We just leave that in a straight line. I move the boss slightly here. As soon as the hook starts, the fixate's going to start. The hook's going to go off first and interrupt it instantly. And luckily, the boss, the abomination dies after that. Otherwise, you'd have to actually kite that fixate. So beware of that. And we actually just one-phase this. So that saves us a lot of time. If we didn't one-phase this, right, if the boss flew up here, when immune, we'd have a A-bomb that spawns, but that A-bomb would be at 0 stacks of that pulsing damage. So it would not be any scary at all. And that's why, like, look how scared our health is, right? Like 11 stacks, 12 stacks. If this guy lives too much longer, we're in like a lot of real danger, right? Like look how heavy those ticks are. Quite scary, which is why these guys are pretty important to kill, and why the weapons being assigned there is really, really nice, because it does a ton of damage to both of them at the same time. Very, very value use of those weapons, in my opinion, and it just makes this fight like literally nothing, right? This is a 50-second clip here of the entire boss fight, and it's just dead, right? So that is the power of weapons on a tyrannical key. Save your 3 spears, save your 3 orbs, and just use them all as soon as the boss gets gripped down. It goes super quick, and it makes a super scary fight into something that does almost nothing, which is very, very nice. Master Machinists is the next one here from the Stonevault, the dual boss here. You want to make sure your damage is split, because they need to die at the same time, but they have different health numbers. That is something to be aware of. The robot has more health than the guy, so be aware of that. Need a little bit more love on the robot here, and of course they don't share health. Now, there's a few things to manage on this boss fight. One is a kick order, of which you should always try and have melee kicks when the boss is nearby, and reserve your ranged kicks for when the boss actually jumps away. So for us, for example, we have our mage designated to kick anytime this boss does her scrap song ability. So boom, there's a scrap song, she jumps away, and you can see our mage is going to position slightly there and just going to be able to get that kick, hopefully. Yep, insta kick, boom, and the boss is back in. That is very, very important. That always happens. So a range always needs to be ready to kick that whenever that ability happens. The other main thing you want to talk about are the vents. So occasionally throughout this fight, the boss will activate 3 out of the 4 vents in the room. You can see them by the fire kind of shooting up On top of them, boom, 1, 2, 3, those are activated. Me instantly ping and move to the inactive vent. This is useful because it allows you to just quickly kind of hide during this explosion, where the box, of course, shoots out waves from each of the sides. So the vents are actively safe. You're completely safe here. And you can see, again, another kick. Like I said, our mage is assigned to do any of these range kicks. The boss started casting when this happened. Mage gets the kick. It's all good. We are on the safe spot. Boom, all the lava goes by because we instantly moved to the inactive vent. Now, sometimes the overlap is a bit more punishing than that. And we can see it later on in the fight, I believe. And again, whenever this happens, right, boom, vents go active. We move to the inactive area because, again, this area is going to start to fill with puddles. All of these areas are going to start to fill with puddles. And it's just easier and safer to be in the area without an active vent. And later on, though, I believe we get caught here. I think it's this one. The vents are going to go active, and then Dorlita is going to jump away, and we're not going to have time to actually move here because this is the ones where they kind of overlap with each other. So boom, Dorlita jumps away, and then the vents activate, so you don't actually know which one is safe. We got unlucky. This one is not safe. However, I ping myself. You see, there's actually a small safe spot, a sliver on either side of the vent, because, of course, standing on an active vent is death. You will just die. However, you stand just beside an active vent, like here, you see it right beside it. This is actually safe. These are some of the waves that come from this boss are one of the mechanics that are smaller than the actual mechanic looks like. So what you're going to see here is we're not going to take any damage from the wave, just the explosion damage, and we can just walk straight through after that. What you're worried about there is moving too early and baiting the puddles there. You can see, like, right as we kill the boss, like the puddles start coming out. Boom, boom, here are these puddles. So we take a tick of the puddle because we're all stacked up here. We instantly move, and that's what we took a little bit of extra damage from. But that is a way to at least survive here. And that is also a situation where you'd probably want to pop some personals here because you can see how much damage just like Crescendo on its own did. And that paired with the fact that we're taking the ticky damage from the vents and taking damage from the puddles because we all have to stack up right next to one makes it very scary. The Spirit Link basically saves us in this case. So if you ever do have to do that, that's when you want to pop big defensives. But it's good because you really don't pop big defensives anywhere else on this fight, right? Like, you should be getting all of the other kicks. Exhaust Fence is usually something that your healers shouldn't have too much issues healing through. You can see the damage is doing, like, compared to like the Grim Batol first boss that we talked about earlier. Like, this is nowhere near that amount of damage, right? So in general, there isn't a lot of individual damage intake, so prioritize using defensives on the Dorlita box, especially if there's an overlap where you have to stand near an active vent instead of an inactive one. Just, again, avoid going on top of an active one because that will kill you no matter what. That is Master Machinist. Let's go to the final boss of Ara-Kara, which has definitely been farming people. So this boss has the big poison waves. That's like the big mechanic here for the mythic version of this fight, and that goes out on all 5 players, and it shoots out waves on either side of you depending on how the mechanic actually decides to. You used to be able to turn them, you can't turn them anymore, and so you kind of have to, like, look and see where your things are pointing before actually getting a dispel. And in general here, when you're going to want to, have as many poison spells as you can in your comp just for this dungeon in general, right? There's a lot of poisons in this dungeon at the start and, of course, on this boss. And so what we're going to do here basically is try and get dispels off as quickly as possible. This one, I think usually I want to dispel the warrior is what we've decided on, except this one I was lined up immediately with the warrior, as you can see here when the debuffs go out. So I don't actually dispel the warrior right away. I dispel myself just to get rid of a debuff. I probably should have just moved and then dispel the warrior, but that is why you don't want to insta-dispel, right? You want to see where people are and then dispel within a couple seconds, ideally. And that's what I'm going to be doing out from here on out. Otherwise, though, players are just kind of out in their own land area, whatever, the DPS go on either side. I find a safe spot, look at everyone else's, where their direction is pointed. Don't run around and move too much. Only move kind of in the direction of your line if you can, just to avoid someone else if you are in someone's way. Kind of similar to Blaze lines on Farak, if anyone is familiar with that, or Nexus Princess in this tier. You don't want to move all over the place and have to make other people adjust because of your movement. You want to move how along your line so that you're not impacting other players. And now the other thing here are these puddles. And so basically you want to make sure you are tagging these blood workers throughout this fight, because the only way to dodge this cosmic singularity, which gets super, super strong, is by using like an immunity, a death advance, or by touching this puddle to root yourself. Only 1 player per puddle though. So you see I go out, boom, I get rooted by the puddle. And again, you see I went kind of far around here because it was a little sketchy going this close because you can get rooted in this and still die, right? So I go around here, and now you have these balls, and you just want to make sure once this detonates, you either use a CC, a root break, or an interrupt on any of these mobs in order to free yourself. So I cat shifted to get out, I bear shift to free myself, and I think we had someone miss here, maybe a yoink. So just be careful. Again, you only get one player per puddle, and it can be very, very useful to ping the puddle you plan on going to, especially if you're in a pug group there, just to make it more clear. And again, you want to try and get as many of these puddles on the ground as possible, just so like if two people go for the same puddle, one person gets there, the other person at least has another option to go somewhere, and they don't just get pulled in because there's nothing else for them to possibly soak. That is the hardest on the first one of the fight because there just haven't been as many blood workers coming through the arena yet. But generally, you want to make sure you're trying to hit these guys whenever they're in a spot that isn't directly on top of an existing puddle, just to create more potential puddles for you to use throughout this fight. And again, as tanking this boss too, you don't want to drag him too close to these puddles for the Cosmic Singularity, because again, if the Cosmic Singularity is overlapping a puddle, that puddle's now useless, right? So watch the positioning of this boss fight. You can see I insta-dispel this guy because he wasn't lined up with anyone. The other melee was here, and I was over here, and it wasn't pointing anywhere. So insta-dispel a DPSer, especially as a tank player, and that's something you should do anytime anyone has a Poison Dispel. If you are a DPS or a healer with a Poison Dispel, I would always dispel yourself. If you're a tank with a Poison Dispel, I would always dispel someone that doesn't have a Poison Dispel. That's what I would recommend. I think even hunters actually can self-Poison Dispel, I think is a new thing this expansion too, so it's a very good talent for this as well. But that's kind of a good rule of thumb. Again, just wait a second, make sure you're not going to absolutely murder anyone with your Poison Dispel if you do it, and then do it on yourself if you have one, or someone else if you are a tank. Otherwise, tanks, just make sure you're picking up these Black Bloods. No one needs to cleave these Black Bloods. They are not significant whatsoever. Tanks just pick them up, and then they just die from cleave on the boss. And again, you see these very small adjustments here to make sure I'm not lining up with anybody, just to make sure that everything is safe. You can run into your own wave. That's what happened up there, I believe. He shot the waves out, and then he tried to dodge and ran on top of his own wave. Be careful of that. That is something that can happen. It is definitely not ideal. So try and plant a little bit, let the waves get some distance before doing any major movement. Try and do the movements before actually dispelling. But again, this fight's quite chaotic, right? So ideally, you do want to save a battle res or two or something, as many as you can, for this boss, because there is a lot going on here, and it is very easy to make a mistake and just get one shot by a poison wave. And of course, it is very important when you do the roots to break as quickly as possible, because you get some of these overlaps, like this one coming up here, where we're going to have this boom explosion, and then quite shortly after it, the erupting webs happen, right? So you need to make sure that you are out and dodge in time. Otherwise, again, you're going to be stunned for quite a bit of time and probably die on higher key levels. So be aware of that. Now, let's get into the big one, the last one, maybe the hardest boss currently, at least with the gear level, it seems. The last boss is City of Threads. You see we have quite a bit of practice here in this 10 key on this boss specifically. The key was not depleted when we got to this boss. I just want you guys to know that. So we are masters of this boss now. Basically, this fight is somewhat variable, actually, in how it works. Basically, the phases that happen consist of the balls that are spawned kind of getting thrown around at players, the boss putting out this dot on the entire group, and then the boss will cast each of the mini boss abilities one time. So Umbral Weave, which does a big hit, and then also roots everyone, and then Tremor Slam, which does a big hit, spawns some adds, and does a murder circle around the boss. So do each of those once. The problem is you don't know the order. Every single phase, it can be either or first, so you need to adapt depending on which ability it is. What we found to be the most kind of wombo combo-y is whenever this Splice is kind of leading into the abilities like it is now, right? So Splice where is taking us down, taking us down, and then Tremor Slam goes on after that. So again, that was 50-50. We didn't know if it's going to be Tremor Slam or Umbral Weave, but you can see we're kind of doing our best to stay together as a group here. It just makes it so much easier because you know the direction all the balls are going, you know exactly how it's going to work, and you can all just move together down, down, down. Whenever balls are spawning, you see it's going to come out in a second here. All the balls are going to come this way. Boom, boom, boom. You can just easily move away. You know where all of them are going, and you can regroup after that. And now that we've had the first one, we know again the second one's going to be Umbral Weave, and this is where it gets scary right right? You have the splice ticking into the actual ability. We're doing the move, doing the move, doing the move, and we're grouping up here to help cleave down this Umbral Weave. This doesn't deal splash damage or anything like that. And if you have a root breaks, that does work, right? Root breaks do work for this. If you have them, freedom effects, all that kind of things. But if you don't have them, you really want to be stacked up as close to the boss as possible just to actually get them killed as quickly as possible. Because as you saw here, we kill these and then immediately the orbs are already flying at us. So very, very important that if you root break as many as you can and kill anything that you can't root break as quickly as possible, just so players are free to move. Then there's the big tank bus. You see I move to the center of the room here while everyone else stays on the edge of the room just so that I don't accidentally cleave them. And course pop a big defensive for that. Now we're in the second phase here where again we have no idea if it's going to be Tremor Slam first or if it's going to be the actual Umbral Weave first. So we have to watch here. Tremor Slam, that means we all need to get out, and you can see here the big thing is we are rotating through our defensives for every single one of these overlaps because it's splice into big party hit. No matter which one it is splice, which is ticking damage, into a big party hit. So it just kind of needs like constant throughput and a good rotation of defensives. Right? We rotate things like Spirit Link, right? Well, that went down as you just saw. Outside of that, we also have Mass Barrier. Outside of that, we also have Zephyr. Outside of that, we also have Personals, right? So players need to make sure that, you know, with the current tuning of this boss, which this is actually a boss I expect to see a pretty significant nerf to in the coming weeks. But with the current tuning of this boss, players need to be very on their toes with their defensive usage and make sure it's actually spread out among these hits and not overcommitted to an individual one of them, because there's two per phase, right? There's one every like 25 seconds basically in terms of these hits and bad overlap. So it's very, very, very scary. And the damage is just constant, right? With the splice going out twice per phase and then the big hits coming out twice per phase. Like it is a very, very healing intensive fight. So as a non-healer player, the best thing you can do is try and spread out your defensives such that you have the most coverage, such that your healer has the easiest time keeping you alive. Because again, what you're really worried about is being topped for this slam here. This is where you're worried about, right? So this is what you need coverage on. Want your health. Do you have a health stone or a health pot available and you're at like 50% health? Probably a good time to use it. Do you have a defensive available and maybe something else isn't available, right? Maybe you don't have a health pot. Maybe you have both available. Only use one for this hit. And this is when you want to use it just before the actual Tremor Slam or Umbral Weave goes off, not beforehand, right? Because this is going to constantly tick you down. And really all that matters, all that you're in danger for is this final hit here. So this is where you want to be as healthy as possible or have your defensive running. The previous ticks leading up to that are less significant, and it's basically just a repeat there, run around the room and continue to try and survive as best you can with the constant ticking damage and occasional big hits. But there we have it, guys. Hopefully this video helps you and your group get these bosses down. If it did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content like it, including +10 route walkthroughs coming out over the next week, and maybe a part 2 to this video if there are more bosses that people want to see covered. Otherwise, shout out to my Patreons for allowing me to continue to put out all of this content for you guys, and I'll see everyone in the next video.